Hi there, I'm called Adrian and welcome to the Principles. Today's video is about health and is on the topic of fibromyalgia. It's an interesting thing that I've been studying health now for decades, and I know that our bodies are designed to heal. They're designed to cleanse themselves of toxins and to keep themselves working as optimally as they can. What I've been learning more recently is that the disconnection between our mind and our bodies, where we don't connect to the sensations in our body like we used to. Certainly, that was my experience anyway, can hinder the healing process. And that's why coming across the Undo app and then having discussions with its co creator, Matthew and the man who developed this method of natural meditation, that completely transformed my approach to meditation and is transforming my health. It's incredibly powerful. And it's one of the reasons I'm making so much content right now. I had Matthew back on to speak to him this week, and I asked him two questions, and he gave such long and detailed answers that I've decided to break this into two parts. So, this is part one, and the question was on the topic of fibromyalgia. What was his take on it? And I'd love to share that with you, which is why I put this video together. I'd like to ask you to do something as well, if you would. If you think this video is valuable to you and useful to you, and you haven't already subscribed to the channel, would you consider subscribing, please? And also, if you'd like to share this with anyone, that would be wonderful as well. I hope you get something from this. And in closing, I'd like to remind you, as always, that you are amazing. And I'd encourage you not to let anyone tell you otherwise. And that includes yourself. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. And that's what really excites me about this, Matthew, because all of
Yeah.
a sudden, instead of having to say, right, I've got to do this and it's on this, and I've got to do this one now, and this one, no, just deal with what comes up and then forget about it and crack on with your
Yes,
day.
exactly. And everybody needs to see that there is no path
No,
outside of your own path
yeah,
of your own life unfolding. Your life is your path. Yeah.
exactly.
And you don't need to, it's all in you. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
what you've just demonstrated there is whatever's happening for you,
yeah,
from you,
yeah.
do that, be that.
Well, I think today I'd like to speak to you about pain. And in particular, one of the ones is about fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
So, what is your take on fibromyalgia?
Okay. So I think it's a classical mistake of the outside in approach to the understanding of the human being, its condition, and life in general. But in this case, we're talking about the human being in a particular condition. And the outside in approach means we are in thought about something that's coming out of a human being as a current expression of them. And our thoughts about them are in search of an understanding of what's coming out. The fact that we're in a search of understanding of what's being expressed by someone shows that we don't at that point understand it. Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in search of understanding it. So the curious thing about thinking is the most unintelligent thing we'd ever do. It has no intelligence of its own. It relies entirely on the information of reality, of life and of the body, to form into any cognition anyway. And so when we look at something like fibromyalgia, what a word, they come up with these amazing titles, but I actually looked it up to really make sure. And it was a little bit mind blowing how it pretty much covers every system of the body having some sort of fault, yeah,
Mhm.
or some sort of expression of pain, or what the everyday person would see as an imbalance, yeah. In fact, anybody who doesn't really understand the significance of pain and illness would see anything under the banner of fibromyalgia, pain, stress, cognition difficulties, nervous problems, sleeping problems,
Mhm.
even menstrual problems. We basically pretty much, if you've got a problem physically or psychologically, you could be, in fact, labeled with fibromyalgia. So it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm not saying it's not real, but what I'm saying is crazy. So what's happening is, from the outside in approach, we are in, and particularly as things become escalated, this approach is showing how absolutely flawed it is. As things in the human condition escalate towards greater distress, greater psychological and physical problems, it's only exposing how little the traditional approach to health and healing actually knows, and also how desperate they become in labeling everything under one banner, under these scary banners, or labeling groups of symptoms. These symptoms are then called symptoms of fibromyalgia, or symptoms of the flu, or symptoms. And what are these conditions? They're just normal day-to-day conditions. Yeah, they're the conditions that every single human being, every single almost animal, will have, to some degree, some of those conditions in their life every day. And the outside-in approach looks at those conditions as through the lens of reaction, through the lens of ignorance, and the lens of fear of pain and illness, because pain and illness has become, over time, we've been taught to fear it and taught to avoid it, and we're pushed towards comfort. And comfort is killing people and becoming incredibly uncomfortable, because the more we have comfort, the less we are being tempered. The less we're allowing ourselves to be tempered by life, and in fact strengthened through the processes of different conditions that happen in our day-to-day life. So that was a little bit long-winded, I thought, but anyway, the thing I'm trying to say here is, I think fibromyalgia, which people suffer a lot of pain, and generally, for periods of time, a fairly significant period of time. And then we try and deal with those symptomatically. So we end up with all these different experts who are only experts in a particular area, maybe in the treatment of muscle pain, or maybe in the treatment of nerve problems, maybe in the treatment of some mental disorders. So we get all these different experts, all disconnected, not knowing anything that the other experts know. So none of them ever seem to have the full picture of the human condition, because they're all specialized. And I've found that without the full picture of anything, I don't understand it. I understand something only once I have the full picture of it, whatever it happens to be. And in all my years of working with these types of problems, one thing I've always avoided is actually listening to labels, because the labels that we place on things are not telling us anything about what's going on in the human being. I can remember fibromyalgia is one thing where people are suffering so much from the ongoing problems of their physicality and also their cognition and so on. But basically, what is causing such a broad range of suffering in people? One, it starts with what's actually already going on inside the person, but undetected by the person themselves. And the reason I say that is because most people suffering these conditions have pain and distress, but have no realization or no knowledge of why they have that until they go to a therapist or a doctor, who then gives them a label, diagnoses them with a condition, but curiously doesn't give them a cure for that condition. And that's what used to frustrate me a lot about the medical approach, was that there's all these clever diagnostics that they come up with, but in the end, these diagnostics don't tell you very much at all. They certainly don't tell you how to heal yourself or how to recover from the problem in most cases, And this is becoming increasingly problematic, I'm finding, as I grow older and see more of these unusual problems happening in the world. I see that they're not really that unusual. They're just different ways in which a deeper part of us is screaming out for attention. And the deeper part of us that's screaming out for attention, if it doesn't get attention through muscle pain, it'll get attention through nervous conditions. If it doesn't get attention through nervous conditions, it'll get attention through skin conditions. And until you give that part of you the attention, you're not going to activate a connection with that part of you. So this is a big point. We are disconnected from something inside of ourselves. And what we disconnect from is trauma. Yeah, and that's a typical side effect of trauma is that when something is incredibly overwhelming at any point in our life, we are able to forget it, cognitively forget it. Yeah. But as you hear this term over and over again nowadays, which is still a true term, but the body remembers, the body doesn't forget.
Yep.
And that's a good term, but not many people really understand the depth and the significance of that term. And it means it's not that the body remembers in the same way that our thought process does. It's the body remembers because it can't forget, because it's in the condition that is also the memory. So the trauma, the effect of a traumatic event has a real physical effect on us somewhere in different parts of our body. And that real physical effect is also the felt memory. It creates the way in which we feel. It becomes the way in which we feel. But you can't separate, for example, a burnt hand from the feeling of being burnt. Yeah, and what people are, so the feeling of being burnt is not separate from the burn itself. And what we're doing and what we've done as human beings is we dissect everything, we separate everything out until we simply don't understand anything, because you have to understand it in relationship with everything else. Yeah, because your burnt hand, if you don't know that your hand is burnt and you just have that sensation, then you're going to say, what's wrong with me? I have this, the term they used to use, we have a phantom pain here. And when we work out there's a burn there, then we go, oh, no, we don't. That's the reason for the pain. Well, with trauma, it's just more difficult to get in contact with the harm and the damage that's there. Because with trauma, we have firstly cognitively forgotten when it's a serious trauma. Yeah. But the reason I say cognitively forget is because we only cognitively forget. We never physically forget. So whatever we've been through changes how we are at a cellular level. It changes us physically. And to me, and this is a big statement, there's no such thing really as psychological change. There is only physical change. Psychological change, you can change the way you are psychologically through using a meditation technique, but you'll have to use the same meditation techniques the next day. Sorry, you have to use the same meditation technique the next day to bring about the same psychological change, because it's only on a psychological, non-existent level. It's only thoughts, if you like, and maybe some feelings. Yeah, so this doesn't really exist in its own right. It's something that we switch on and off our thinking. Yeah. Whereas if that change happens at a physical level, then that change is not something we have to then try and bring about again the next day. Once something changes physically, it is changed. Yeah. So if you're, and you feel different so if you've been traumatized, you feel a change, and you may not, and you don't know what's wrong. You haven't realized what's happened, or you've forgotten what's happened. And in having that change occur, it changes how it feels to be you. And where do you know how it feels to be you? But in your body. So it changes how it feels to be in your body. So we have that level of memory which we cannot suppress and we cannot reject. And this is something that most people don't understand, is that the suppression of memory is only related to cognition. It's not related to the living being. that you are. Yeah. And anybody, I'm trying to say this in a simple way, that anybody can relate to this, in the sense that they have many ways in which they feel on a day-by-day basis. And a lot of the time, they don't know why they feel that way. So cognitively, they've forgotten. But the memory of the actual existence of the effect as how it feels now in that area, whether it's more tense than it was before, whether it's more painful than it was before, that memory is a frequency or a vibration or a tension. It could bring it down to as simple as this: it's a tension that has formed in the flesh of the body. And this is how we hold memory in the body. And that's where you get sort of like body postures. You end up with a permanent body posture, a permanently changed body posture, simply through the repetition over a long enough period of thinking and feeling in a certain way. Yeah. And so this gradually changes you on a physical level, and that body posture changes. It can also change back. How does it change back? It changes back to its natural posture when that behavior or that way of thinking and the way of feeling, that you felt, when that changes, and it means it's actually released from the body, then the body returns to its relaxed and natural state. And this is where this bodily approach to meditation is the only approach to meditate to ourselves that really enables the body to actually release and relieve itself of the effects of lifelong traumas, lifelong behaviors, lifelong habits that form grooves, even in our brain. We get certain pathways and so forth, all the way through our whole system is affected. So back to fibromyalgia, what's happening here is what I see happening here is people have firstly had trauma in their life at some stage, things that they've forgotten about. And these symptoms of physical and psychological symptoms are driven by this underlying stress and pressure of suppression of events, of not the events themselves, of course, but the effects of those events. And the effects of those events held as tensions and pain and trauma in the body, These are coming out of, I see fibromyalgia is nothing more really than any other illness as well, and pain as well. It can be reduced to what is not healthy in the body, trying to show itself in order to get connection again, in order to get connection with our disconnection from ourselves in too much thinking. Too much of an outside-in approach to ourselves. So we're so lost in thought, meaning that we get so lost in thinking that the more we think, the less we sense, the less we feel. I've used the word sensing and feeling quite differently to emotion and thinking. So emotion and thinking to me are pretty much the same thing. You get emotionally charged thoughts, and those thoughts keep the emotion charged. And there's a bit of a circle you get stuck in. The story you're pissed off about keeps you pissed off. The story you're sad about keeps you sad. And the sadness feeds your story, and you get stuck in that emotion loop. So to me, this is a misuse of thinking. But below thinking is the pain and the distress that is held in our systems, that accumulates over time, accumulates through our life, because we're no longer recognizing the significance of what we need, of feeling, and what it really means to feel. So fibromyalgia is many different symptoms, hundreds of them. It's just incredible. When you open up the page on fibromyalgia, it's like, well, what isn't fibromyalgia? It's like, this is just like a desperate concept to try and explain to people what their problem is. But I don't agree with it because it makes people overwhelmed. Yeah, it doesn't actually help them understand. You could have a bruise, and we can diagnose that as fibromyalgia today. You could have difficulty concentrating, and we can diagnose that as fibromyalgia today. Now, I'm not meaning to run down the seriousness of people suffering from fibromyalgia, but I do wish to simplify, which doesn't mean to undermine the importance of it, but to, our problems are very, very complex when we try to deal with them on a psychological, mental level. And this isn't how we resolve them. This is how we get completely overwhelmed by them. Yeah. We need a simple approach to a complex problem. And the simple approach that I've found works to pain and this type of suffering is that to understand that the people who are listening now, who are suffering from this ailment, you all know that you have feelings of pains and sensations and agitations and distress of different natures that you feel each day. And most of those, you don't know why they're there, or at least many of them, you don't know why they're there. Now, if you're suffering from fibromyalgia, yeah, you would definitely say, I don't know why they're there. And why I'm going to tell you straight out why they're there. It's because you are holding the pressure of tension and memories and distress in your system that you don't have a cognitive memory of, and these need to heal. And I have heard one gentleman that you've interviewed mention that fibromyalgia, or this level of pain, is actually a healing symptom, or symptom of healing. And I agree that it's a symptom of healing, but it won't be a healing if you don't know how to embrace it as a healing, and you go into your mental reactions to the distresses that are part of this condition. Yeah. And the mental reaction to these distresses that are part of this condition are what re-traumatize you in a way, because they keep you stuck in this pattern. And so they make hopelessness and fear over something that is essentially very, very simple. Yeah. And then on top of this, there's another part to this, and that is that the traumas that we have in our life, which we no longer know why they're there or what caused them, these traumas cause trauma of that level causes a disassociation from the memory of the trauma itself. But it also causes a disassociation in that part of your body that's traumatized. And that part of your body that's traumatized is necessary it's necessary for that to be sensitized in order for you to know when you are being hurt in that way again. So for a person who's been put down and bullied and made to think they're stupid over a period of time throughout their life, then when somebody talks to them like they're stupid, they don't have the same reaction that a person who knows they're not stupid would have. Yeah. So they've, in a sense, numbed out by that treatment, and numbed out by that treatment over time, and numbed out to that treatment now, because they've actually been so affected by being put down that they feel put down. They agree with how they feel, and they agree with what the person's saying on some level. Yeah, I'm just using an example. Mm-hmm. So this traumatization of the human being to fall into a belief system about themselves simply because they've been treated a certain way, which is, the worst belief systems of all, then make it impossible for them to defend themselves against the same sort of treatment here and now. In fact, in many cases, when it's serious, I would say in the majority of cases in my work, I've noticed that serious traumas in the area of their life that they are traumatized in, they have a very disassociated relationship with that area of life in general. So they're unable to really feel anything much about it at all, other than distress. And even that starts to numb out. And so that person becomes, that body, if you like, that part of their body, that function in their body to be sensitized out of that area towards harm is no longer functioning. So they're unable to detect when they're being harmed. Yeah. And so that goes on in their day to day, in their life today. And so if you've been traumatized and you've been harmed, you're unable to now detect that harm. You're therefore unable to repel that harm because you don't even really realize it's happening. So you have no defense against harm. And so you go through your day getting harmed by things that you have learnt to accept as acceptable. And yet your body does not accept it because it's harmful. Yeah. So your body still has this innate reaction. And so the harm of that is called causing fibromyalgia in the end of the picture. Because I'm saying fibromyalgia is the symptom of something much deeper, or the many symptoms of one or two deeper things in most cases. Yeah, it does. And the many symptoms are the end product of that deeper condition. But I actually heard your man that you interviewed on this last time saying, yeah, this is something that happens where people, the condition itself becomes another trauma. And he mentioned he doesn't really know why that happens. I thought this would be really good to explain. And why this happens is because the person no longer can defend themselves against bad treatment today, because they actually get to a point after a while where they're so beaten down, so tired, so crushed by life, and the many things that are happening in our world today are so overwhelming on the human condition that they simply have no fight and no natural reaction to protect themselves. They can't even tell whether they're being harmed or not. So this harm that's happening today is actually compounding the traumas behind fibromyalgia. It's compounding the trauma. And so they're actually getting worse. Yeah, because they're still experiencing in their body the harm, and they're still accumulating harm. So one thing I often say to people is the first thing that really has to happen, or the most important thing, it's never the first thing, but the most important thing that has to happen if you're going to heal is you've got to stop the harm that you're trying to heal yourself from. And if you're in a traumatized situation, and you've been in that traumatized situation your life long and been around the same types of people all your life that have, the same types of destructive interactive behaviors, even if it's simply you've never learnt the difference between food and poison. And what I call poison here is junk food. Yeah, you've never really learnt the difference. You've always been around people who find this acceptable. So you continue with this behavior that is actually harmful, not helpful. Yeah. But until you start to change that behavior, you don't even resensitize to the fact that it doesn't actually feel good to smoke a cigarette. Yeah. And it's a gradual process. So you have to start stopping the harm. It's a very important part of the healing process. So how do we stop the harm? We first have to become resensitized to the harm that is there already. So all of these symptoms that people are suffering, I'm suggesting that underneath those symptoms is a lot of harm, a lot of distress, a lot of pain, and they're already feeling it. I want to say, people often think, well, how do I get to the trauma behind the symptoms of fibromyalgia or any other illness? Yeah, any other illness. How do I get to it? Well, you're already in touch with it. You just don't like how it feels. You already are in touch with it because you know how you're feeling, and you know you don't want to feel that way. And that pain and that distress that you feel, the way it feels to be you when you're having a hard day of suffering from your fibromyalgia, how that's making you feel about yourself and about your life, the hopelessness, the fatigue, everything that's making you feel is not understood to you cognitively, but you can't but know it physically because you're in the condition. That is the trauma speaking to you. That is the presence of your trauma, and it's bringing your attention to this hurt part of yourself through various symptomatic breakdowns of the body. Yeah. And so there you have a way to begin resensitizing yourself and then further healing the effects of this condition. And what am I saying there is that because by feeling the way you feel, which is not easy at first, but feeling the way that feels in you is going to is you going straight to the source and the cause, or actually, I'm not going to say cause, I'm going to say to the source of what is only known to you as symptoms. The reason I won't say cause is because I don't like to separate the trauma from the symptoms, because the symptoms are actually an extension of your trauma. They are not separate to it, but you do separate your symptoms from your trauma in order to avoid the things that you don't like the feeling of. But the fact is, you don't actually, none of us actually succeed in that separation. We just succeed in confusing ourselves because we separate what we know in all these symptoms and labels from the other thing we know as the way it feels to be ourselves in that condition. And we separate these two things. So what is fibromyalgia really? It's the condition that the individual suffering that fibromyalgia happens to be suffering. It's the condition they're in. And it's going to be different for lots of people. That's why it has so many symptoms. So however you are with your fibromyalgia, that is significant. That is what you need to go to, not run away from and avoid, because that's your body expressing something that is not fully realized and not had the attention it needs to actually process and heal over time. And this can be made up of many different symptoms. So whatever symptom you happen to be annoyed with today, that's enough. Just deal with that. Just deal with how that makes you feel. But how do I deal with it? Not through thinking. You know, this is not even accessible through thinking. Thinking is what causes us to disassociate from feeling. So we are not the healers. The body has been around for probably millions of years. I don't know, because I haven't been, I don't know. It's been around a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Medicine has been around for a couple of hundred years. Witch doctors have been around for a few thousand years. And pretty much, to me, medicine and witch doctors are pretty much based with the same approach. It's got a lot to do with what you've been convinced to believe is the cure of a condition or the right approach. Yeah. It's nothing to do with what you actually know for and from yourself. And that's why it's very, very confusing for these poor therapists and doctors who haven't actually healed themselves. So if they haven't healed themselves, they are the classic unhealed healer, the blind leading the blind, simply on a hunch, little more than a hunch. In certain circumstances, of course, they've got, tremendous ways of diagnosing, a tumor or something. Okay, great. This is overestimated in its application and in how it can help people. What people are suffering from today, when we're talking about a condition like fibromyalgia, is, I think, an environmental issue that is hitting their bodies, combined with an internal trauma issue. Yeah, maybe sometimes it's only environment. I doubt it. Yeah, because I would say I doubt it would be ever. I've never come across that. Put it this way, I've always found that when a person has a serious physical illness, there is always a serious psychological distress. And deeper than that, psychological meaning the way in which they're thinking is distressful. But deeper than that, they don't feel very well. They feel depressed, or they feel traumatized. What everybody's getting used to the word of traumatized now. So to me, I think I've summed up fibromyalgia. I've also tried to suggest a solution. If I ever point something out, I like to give the person a solution. And the solution is, this is why I put together the Undo Meditation app. Mm-hmm. One of the main things I discovered in my early 30s, and I'm 63 now, one of my main things that I discovered some 200 meditation retreats ago was that people didn't know what I was talking about when I was telling them just to come back to the feelings in their body, because people didn't know that feelings were not what you think about. Thinking about your feelings is not the same thing as feeling the sensations that are felt in the body automatically.
I think sensations is a better word, Matthew, for that, because feelings and emotions are going to get conflated.
I agree. I've noticed this, actually. I think I should change that. Actually, purely physical sensations. Yeah. And as I started to say there before, yeah, let's do that. Sensations, not feelings and emotions, but sensations, not thoughts, but sensations are something that you cannot control.
Yep.
Because you're not supposed to. Yeah. Suppressing them or drugging them out is the way in which we control them, or avoiding them, or escaping them, or distracting from them. But in the body, it's still there. So why can't we control these things? Because we're not supposed to control them. They're not wrong. They are correct. They are the body's intelligence. And the interesting thing is that the body, which I said a moment ago, has been around for millions of years. It requires sensitivity inside of itself in order to know for and within itself, not on a mental level, but on a natural, organic feeling level, on a sensory level, on a sensational level. It knows when something feels wrong. Yeah, when something's not right. And if it can't, if it's numbed out to those feelings, or somehow disconnected from those feelings in there, or those sensations, then things don't work. So these sensations within every illness, within every pain, the body takes care of these. Mm-hmm. So people suffering from fibromyalgia, your body will take care of this. You won't, as a thought process. You, the thinking personality, does not know how to heal yourself. That is not what we do. No therapist and no doctor has ever healed anybody. Yeah. And I've been in the healing profession all my life, and I'm really good at it. I get amazing results, both psychological and physical results for people. But the secret is that I actually only enable the connection of all parts of the individual to come back together. Yeah. And then the healing process begins. Yeah. And that healing process is completely natural to the body itself. The body will heal itself. Yeah. So that's what you've got to trust. You've got to rely on, when you feel pain, when you feel distress, it's not wrong. It's not something to get rid of. It's not even something you need to understand cognitively, because actually you never will. In the same way that you don't cognitively understand as something as simple as being sad. Yeah, you cannot capture sadness in a thought. You can only conceptualize it. And a conceptualization is an intellectualization. That's the best we can do. But that is not understanding sadness. So they cannot understand the condition you are in through the thought process. And that's why we get so frustrated, both as therapists and as people going to therapists. We get so frustrated with our inadequacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not our fault. We're just missing the point. Yeah. What we're missing is that the body is the one it's going to heal itself.
Yeah.
How do you heal it? You got to feel the condition it's in, knowing, or at least at first, gambling on the possibility that that feeling of your condition, by feeling it, that is going to activate the body's process of healing it and resolving the trauma as at a feeling level, not at a thought level. Sorry, at a sensation level, as you pointed out before, at the level of physical sensation.
Yeah. I find the best time for me is either the end of the day when I'm winding down, or the start of the morning to do the kind of body meditation, because it's easier, because there's less chatter going up here. It's very peaceful when I first wake up, and it's very peaceful just before I go to bed. So it's a faster in for me. So what I was saying was, when I lie in bed in the morning, it's really interesting, because if I simply lie there and just keep breathing, and I just notice what I'm sensing, it fascinates me how much is actually going on that during the course of the day I ignore, because I'm distracted by all this stuff in reality.
Okay.
So it amazes me how little pains and kind of pops, and I hear sounds and I feel things going on, and I just float with them. Sometimes it leads somewhere interesting, and sometimes it doesn't. But what I've noticed over time was, a lot of the aches and pains I had have just gone. I just don't have them anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wasn't
Yeah.
concentrating to get rid of them. It was just that, as part of that process of, I think maybe not acknowledge them, or I would have honoring them, to say, look, you have a place, so I'm with you. And then they go away.
This brings up a really important point, actually, for helping people feeling and healing their pain. In the app, I have got that section, as you know, on the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
A little bit similar to, say, New German medicine, or
Yeah.
I think there's one or two other people who've written books on it and so on, So, but I would say the most detailed and thorough one that I've ever seen, I didn't go much into it, but was New German medicine. Now that's very good, because that turns into a detailed diagnostic tool. Yeah. Firstly, I apologize if I make any mistakes in my expression of this New German medicine. It will only be my ignorance of the actual, the actual work that the man's done. And I don't mean to put it down at all, or lessen it. But what I want to do is, what I have noticed is, and part of the reason in my app I put only certain amounts of body parts relating to symptoms and conditions in there as a guide for people to look up certain conditions, and then use the meditations that I designed for the recovery from those conditions, and explain the thought process and the feelings and the deeper sensations that will be noticeable if you have those conditions. So it was just to give people aha moment, where they go, this is real. This does make sense, because it will make sense, because it's always a body part is related to a particular behavior. How we use our hands, let's say. There's certain things we can do with our hands that we can't do with our head. And so therefore, dexterity and getting a handle on things, getting a grip on things, this type of attitude of getting a grip on life, or getting control of things, in our life, or feeling control and so forth. This is I'm very basically giving people an indication between the hands and the thought processes and the desires that come before it, that are expressed through those hands, They're used for lots of things, of course, but each finger is doing a different thing and so forth, So, and that which it's doing, that which you express through that part of your body, if the topic of your thinking and the topic of your life that you can express through that part of your body is in any way malfunction or distorted, then you're going to have restrictions. Those restrictions come through in the muscularity, particularly in your hands. So if you're having trouble, if you're really hanging on tight all the time because you're frightened of falling off the cliff, then you're going to have, even if you're not hanging on to anything physically, there is this constant inflammation, this distortion going through to the muscles of the forearms and the hands that will turn into undue tension and problems of that area because of always hanging on tight. It's just a really basic thing. Now, the reason I only use a few of those in the app, I'm going to enhance on them over time, but it was mainly because, and I've noticed this with you actually, is that you haven't worried about going to each and every little detail. What you've done is you've got what I'm talking about. So the only reason I put those details in there is so that the person can intellectually acknowledge the link, if you like, or the connection, and then the disconnection, and therefore the need for the reconnection between understand what you're thinking and you're feeling and your behaviors, what areas of your body they have the most effect on. Specific behaviors having specific effects in correlated parts of the body. So a typical one is your genitals, which you use for sex. If you've got imbalances in and disturbances around sex, and you're going to have imbalances and disturbance in those areas of your body and difficulties in those areas of your body, which is very, very common, no big deal, but that's what that expression is going to be. What's behind the use of that part of your body is sexual thoughts and feelings. Yeah. So just to make it really, really basic. Now, once you've got the concept, you throw it away. Yeah. Because then what you've got is something more, which is and that is that you've learned that all you have to do is feel whatever is going on in any part of your body, and that will bring about a recovery from the distresses and the underlying issues held in that part of your body, which will in turn cause you to feel better or feel back to normal, back to a balanced state. And then if you're not feeling, if your feeling is balanced and comfortable, then of course your thinking in that area of life will also be balanced and comfortable. And then your actions will be balanced and comfortable, or comfortable is probably not the best word, but your feelings through to your actions will change from destructive to non-destructive. Yeah. And so this doesn't have to, this can turn into, if we're not careful, into an outside-in approach where we go to the app and we say, oh, this part of the app, I'll look up the head and what's that about, and I'll try and work my way back. And I'm going to hone in, like you said, I'm going to focus in on that body part. And as you said yourself, you don't concentrate on that body part. Yeah. Now, this is a very important thing, because what we have learnt to do as human beings is we've learnt to, we believe that we can control things. And
good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah. We believe that we're in control. Yeah. And essentially, if we understand something mentally, then we're in control. Yeah. So we are very deluded by this outside-in approach to ourselves, that we rely on the most superficial and idiotic thing that we have, which is thinking. And we don't rely on the most complex and powerful, most alive, and most intelligent thing that we have, which is bodily sensations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in there we have everything. Yeah. That is the history of mankind. Yeah. So in there we know what to do. Out here, we haven't got a clue. We're sort of like, we're funny. Every generation we like to reinvent the wheel. And you see that. You see people getting excited about things in their 20s, and you think, hang on, that's the same, that's been done 100 times. There's nothing really new about that at all. Not having a go at anybody, but it's funny how the human being over and over again forgets that there's nothing that new about anything that's going on out there. It's just doing it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, that's a pretty broad statement. I'm not going to unpack that. I'll just let that fly away, and we'll get on with what I'm talking about. And that is, what you said there was very important. And the people who have the greatest difficulty, I find, with understanding and even accepting that this meditation is different to any other meditation, particularly those who've been introduced and had an experience with Vipassana meditation. This is not a criticism, I'm just using it, yeah, because they have this thing called body scanning. And in this body scanning, they learn to mentally focus on different parts of the body.
There's that disconnect again.
There's a total disconnection.
Yep.
Yeah. And they don't realize that there is no way to find connection this way.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, no Buddhist technique, any technique, not just Buddhist, but it is a Buddhist technique, but no technique is free of the approach of, I'm the human being in control of my destiny, and I'm going to practice this approach and achieve that result. Yeah. The classical path to enlightenment stuff. I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and it's going to result in that. Well, it will result in that, but that's just a thought-induced state. Mm-hmm. There's nothing authentic about it. Yeah. So when we bring this, that's why everybody can do it. If everybody can practice this particular way of acting, then they will all end up around about the same type of person, but they're not going to be themselves. Yeah. So this is what's interesting about this approach, is it's not even an approach really. It's something that I just came upon me, came over me, came out from inside of me, and which I actually fought a lot. And that's when I was a monk. I would fight against this happening because what was happening in my body was completely unrelated to what I was then practicing every day as a monk. In fact, the two things were completely opposed. And eventually my body won. Yeah. Luckily, and when I say my body, I now don't say my body, I will say I won. The body won. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And so when you talk about not focusing in on this, it's very important to, I know you understand this, but you bring it up, and it's something that you perhaps, because of 50 years of meditation, you've been able to go, holy shit, there's the missing link.
Yep.
Whereas this is not necessarily easy. Yeah. And even for those people, particularly for people who had decades of meditation, traditional meditation under their belt, they find it really hard when I say, when you are chanting, you are thinking. No, I'm not. I'm just omming. Well, om is a word. Om is a chant. Yeah. And why are you doing that? You're doing that to bring about a change in the way you are. Yeah. So you're once again this thought-based human being. I'm the smartest one on the planet out of all the other animals, and I'm going to control my destiny. And I'd like to throw that around and say, this is such a burden. Yeah. And what we're talking about here is, whether you have illness or sickness, you need to let that control. That is in control. That condition in your body is taking over, whether you like it or not. Yep. And you won't understand why, and you don't need to understand why, and you shouldn't give yourself a hard time for not understanding why. Yeah. I would go so far as to say that I've brought myself to this level of understanding of the details of what I talk about, not really for myself, but so that I could explain it to other people. Yeah. only to help other people understand. And even then I find this is a very difficult thing to understand. Yeah, because I'm actually saying that thought is not king. What you think is not king. And that is not what's driving your life. That's what's destroying the life of the body. That's what's destroying the life of the organism. That's what's destroying our species, is all the different ways in which we've learned to think about ourselves in separation, in conflict with one another. Mm-hmm. And when you come back to the body, and pain and illness is the greatest leveler. When we're in pain and we really have illness and we can't conquer it with our clever techniques, we have to let nature take its course. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do we do that? Is if you, like you said, you just lay there in the morning, or you just sit there quietly, physically still, and whatever is happening in the body, at first you don't even know it's happening. As you said yourself, you're laying there, and after a while, you're feeling more of what's happening because you're getting less thinking, yeah, yep. or you're just getting more attuned to yourself again, mm-hmm. yeah, and you're seeing that, oh my God, there is so much happening, yeah, on an ongoing basis, yeah. That has got nothing to do with thinking, yeah, it's all to do with the body's own volition. It's the nature, the power source of nature, and this is what I also like to say to people: you are the body, therefore you are nature. Yeah. Therefore you have all that power, all that processing of whatever's wrong with you, whatever you think's wrong with you, that is within you. But I don't mean for people to take this to silly extremes. You know, if you've already developed a brain tumor, you may not be able to heal from that. Yeah. You may need to have surgery or whatever. And I wouldn't suggest that in a million years, but the thing is, I was also suggest, if we've damaged ourselves to such an extent, and we're not talking about that with fibromyalgia, but if we damaged ourselves to such an extent, then we may need some help, yeah, of a very aggressive nature, which is what's on offer. But our reaction to that, even if we have to do that, our thought reaction to that is the crucial thing. That when we have pain, when we have illness, it's our mental resistance, fear, and mental hatred, mental rejection, mental avoidance of that, our beliefs around that, around pain and illness, that are causing us to approach it in such a way that it not only increases our suffering and brings us from simply being in pain and feeling that pain into actually suffering that pain. Mm-hmm. And that suffering, the difference between suffering our pain and feeling our pain, is that suffering our pain is caused by our thought reaction to it and trying to control it. And feeling our pain without thinking about it actually is coming back into contact with our condition exactly as it happens to be presenting itself from within ourselves, and feeling it as it is actually brings relief.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's a really interesting point, because that leads to something that I want to talk to you about.